Awesome. Thanks, guys. All right then. Well, let's get going. So, hypernormalization and isomorphism is a complete mouthful. But I don't know about you, when I say it, just make me feel rather clever. Has anybody come across them? Has anybody heard of them before? Is that a no?
No.
Thanks, Aidan. Okie dokie. Well, you're in for an absolute treat. Um, they are really, really important concepts that aren't from health and social care. They're from wider sociology, really. And hypernormalization is more of a political idea. But when I've been exposed to them, like lots of concepts, when we get exposed to ideas, we apply them to our own world, don't we? And these two ideas, when I've been exposed to them, I think they've really resonated with me about advocacy and in helping me understand some of the challenges we've got in advocacy. So that's kind of why I'm bringing it to you, because I genuinely think it's a really interesting way to see. It's like a lens through to see advocacy. So what we're going to do is I have got a presentation prepared, and I'm going to use this to talk through. As I say, please contribute, ask questions and comments. Well, before we begin, I'm introducing this idea as black belt advocates about practice. So one of the ideas about a skill, isn't it, is that we need to practice these skills. So as advocates, these are the skills I think we need to develop an abundance of. So we want to develop curiosity. We want to develop our own self-worth as humans and as advocates. We want to develop the skill of asking questions, and we definitely want to be brave. So this is throughout these sessions, I invite you to practice these skills by leaning into those ideas. Is that okay? Awesome. Right, here we go. Hypernormalization. Get your pens out. So hypernormalization, it comes from an academic, Yurchek, who is a Russian academic, and he wrote a book talking about all the paradoxes of life in Soviet Russia in the 70s. And it comes from the idea that at that time, the Soviet Union, everybody knew that the system was failing. And if you think about 1970s Soviet Russia, Soviet Union, the life was really hard. There were food shortages. There was huge corruption. Industries that were previously seen as safe institutions were breaking down. And yet, even though that was glaringly obvious to everybody, and there were famous images, weren't there, of people queuing for bread for a day, even because everybody knew that things were breaking, people were constantly told that everything is fine. Everything is fine. Everything's okay. The Soviet way is the way. And you're checking this book, he talks about this, and he talks about it creates the pretense of a functioning society. It creates this pretense, it's like delusional, that everybody knows that it's not working, but we kind of buy along. We go along. We buy into it. And he coined this phrase called hypernormalization. So we're normalizing things that aren't normal, and we're making them normal. We're making them normal. So that's the origins of it. I'm now going to jump forward 20 years and reference a BBC filmmaker called Adam Curtis. Now, this is not an easy watch, okay? It's 2 hours, it's in 2 parts. I think I've watched it 3 times and I still only understand maybe 40% of it. But I encourage you to, if you like what we're talking about today and want to deepen your understanding, please check this film out. You can get it on iPlayer. And in this film, Adam Curtis talks about kind of the fakeness of the West, and how institutions have collapsed, and how everybody knows it's not working. Everybody knows it's failing. Like institutions from the church, politics, governments are failing. We know it's failing. And this is the critical part. We know it's failing, but because there's no alternative, we all buy into it. We all buy into this fake reality. And that's key to this idea of hypernormalization. We know it's broken, but because there's no credible alternative, we then buy in. And if you think about in today's, I'm going to give you some examples in a second from health and social care. But if you just think about like what's happening in politics in America and the rise of Trump and how much fake news, and even Trump, he coins the term, paradoxically, he goes around saying it's fake news, it's fake news, it's fake news. He's the one propagating all this fake news. But everybody buys into it. You collectively as a society that we buy into it because there's no credible alternative. So I'm just going to pause now. Any questions or thoughts so far? Gus, just unmute.
Apologies. I'm so used to Teams. I've been struggling finding my way around Zoom today. So I did, when you asked right at the start, actually, about isomorphism, I was I was trying to raise my hand then, but I'd managed to put my video, because obviously the unit that I work into, the autism unit, it's a key concept, so we are very much aware of that as an service. But with hypernormalization, yeah, I'd watched the Adam Curtis thing as well. But I'm a bit troubled, I think, by that notion of there's no alternative. Especially when you're talking with regard to Trump there and that kind of thing. And I mean, obviously, there's that kind of feeling that a lot of systems are failing, but I don't know. Are you able to explain a wee bit more about that sort of idea, that concept that there's no alternative?
Yeah, it's the full phrase is there's no credible alternative, is what Adam Casey says. He says there's no credible alternative for us to get behind and believe in. So we accept the falseness of whatever it is that's being told to us. So let's one of the examples I can think of is like climate change. Is climate, and usually these things are because it's big and it's complex and it's difficult. And as human beings, generally, we don't like that. We like things to be simple and quick, don't we? So if you think about climate change, universal agreement that climate change is here, but it's tricky. It's tricky. What do we do? Do we do we move to green renewable energy? Do we stop the coal industry? There's all kinds of consequences of dealing with climate change, and it's hard and it's messy.
Yeah.
So what happens then is that because it's hard and it's messy, we don't do it, and instead we give oil companies new licenses to drill for new oil. Nobody thinks that that's sensible. Nobody would say that that's a sensible, but yet that's what we do because it's difficult, and it's that thing about there's no credible alternative. Because if there was a credible alternative, we'd all get behind it, it'd be fine. But because there isn't, we accept the fakeness, the falseness that this is the way it has to be. And in a second, I'm going to show you how this happens in health and care, and just how day to day. And I invite you to come to the next slide with a very open heart and think, gosh, I do that. Because then we all accept these things as quite normal, and they're not. Helen.
Okay, I might be preempting your next slide, because I was just about to say that we experience it every day in our jobs. And as an example, like, if you take the Care Act, half the time we're saying, well, you're not implementing the well-being principle here because you haven't provided this person with this service or told them where they can find it. And they go, well, we haven't got the resources. And they go, this is just how it is now. And that, to me, is a really classic example of hypernormalization. And I bet we've all got examples that we can throw in that are like that. So sorry if I preempted your next slide, but I was just
No,
thinking...
you've segued beautifully, Helen. Segued beautifully.
Oh, there you go.
So this is what tends to happen in terms of the hypernormalization process. So things become too complicated. And because it's too complicated, we don't feel safe. And instead of leaning into that feeling of not feeling safe and looking at it for what it is, we then create a comforting story. So the story becomes like the fake, the fakeness, even though we know it's not true. And then we all buy into it because there's no alternative. So we all go along with it. So using that kind of flow, I'm gonna give you an example from many of our work. So we know that people with learning disabilities and autistic people stay in a mental health hospital for an average of 5 years. Some, it's over 20. We also know about half of this group don't even need to be in hospital. So why? Why have we got 1,000 people in hospital who don't need to be in a mental health hospital? Why? Well, it's complicated. It's complicated. It's like, oh, we don't know what to do. It's complicated. And then I hear people say, there's no community providers. There's no homes in the community. There's no placements. And they're safe in hospital, so we'll keep them in safe. Even though it doesn't make any sense, it costs more money. People are miserable. People are harmed in hospital. But because there's no alternative, all of us as an advocacy sector, we kind of buy into that. And I know myself, I've done it, and I'll guarantee that you've done it. You've been in meetings where it's really difficult to get a provider, and then the days turn into weeks, the weeks turn into months, and then the person's been there for a year and there's been no move on discharge. Tell me I'm wrong. Please give me some hope that this doesn't happen all the time. Gus.
Right, sorry to jump back in. This is very much my bread and butter, as you know, Kate, because I'm discharge planning meetings just about every day. For people with complex autism who are in a national autism service. And yes, it's an absolutely horrendous situation because we've got a catastrophic state with social care. I think that's the kind of main issue really is the catastrophic state of social care with the crisis in recruitment and retention, but also lack of other resources like suitable placements, etc. But I wouldn't agree. I wouldn't agree that with that sort of hypernormalization hypothesis. Okay. I think we can lapse into that. But I mean, no, certainly from my perspective, just about every day, I'm making these arguments, making the case that my clients shouldn't be in hospital, and I'm really pushing. And as you know, I try and look into every possible sort of option. I think part of, you going back to that idea of no credible alternative. The problem is that the system really is broken. I mean, we've only got so many tools available to us as advocates. And the kind of tools we normally use, like a mental health tribunal, for example, they're not actually able to fix that situation. And we're having to be sort of quite inventive at how we approach these things. But the whole system's broken, basically. So it's not even the fault of the local authorities often, although they're the ones who've got the responsibility, the local authorities and the ICBs. But it's they don't have control over sort of UK-wide political issues that can shape things like the kind of workplace environment where you can actually recruit staff and that kind of thing. So there's sort of much sort of bigger issues there. I mean, yes, it's hypernormalized in the sense that because things are so broken and we can't fix it, these situations are going on for years, and it's absolutely horrendous. But I sort of I push back against this idea that advocates are being meekly accepting of that, because I really don't think we are. And I think we're some of the ones who are really, really challenging that. So that was all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Gus. Thanks, Gus. Janine.
I to agree with Gus. I'm a him/her, and I'm also a mother of autism. So I've come across it in mental health institutes, but I do argue, but they should have the rights of everybody else. And I have got a few out by involving the learning difficulty team. So I will fight for them like I do everybody else, basically.
Brilliant. Thanks, Janine. Helen.
Yeah, I don't think I think you're right that advocates are pushing back, but if the workforce is hypernormalized, there's only a point to which you can push back. And I don't want to sound miserable about it, but having in the work that I'm doing, meeting advocates, there is a real sense of frustration that there's not as much that could be done now as there perhaps was a few years ago, and as a group of people, we probably do need to fight back against that. It's not that we're not challenging, but we need to figure out how we can challenge effectively.
I agree, Helen. I agree. And I think that this is why I wanted to talk about these concepts, because it's not about blame. I'm not, I love advocates. Anyone who knows me knows I love all advocates. We do an amazing job, and it warms my heart to hear these examples of you fighting back. Collectively, though, we have got a problem. Collectively, we've got a problem. Collectively, we have hospitals where advocates don't have a presence. We've got mental health hospitals where advocates only go in if they have a referral. Collectively, that's a problem. We have contracts and cultures within advocacy services whereby people won't get involved in discharge planning because that's not my job. I've heard advocates say that. So collectively, I think this is a really interesting way for us to challenge ourselves and be aware of just how difficult it is and some of the reasons why it's so difficult to push back. I get incredibly frustrated in the advocacy I do with families about why it takes so long. I just can't believe where's the sense of urgency? There's one family I've been involved with since January. We're in June and we still haven't had a discharge planning meeting. I'm emailing, I reckon, every 2 weeks. Why? It doesn't make sense. The system is absolutely broke. It's and whether that's about austerity and funding and services being on the knees, and I'm saying this honestly, not in the spirit of criticism, but in the spirit of understanding. Let's understand what some of the things that's going on. Tracy, then Emma, and then I'll move on. Tracy, please.
I agree with you. I understand what other advocates is saying, but yet there are times when you reflect back and you think, because the system is so broken, then we sit in a meeting or whatever, and we're told that's it. There's no service available that can offer that. There's nothing that we can offer. So sometimes the only alternative is to accept a substandard service for our client, and you walk away feeling a sense of unease, but you are on a day-to-day basis trying to challenge case by case. But I think you're right. As a society as a whole, the system's broken, and we're not doing enough to try and make it, to try and repair it, to get better results for our clients. And I think unless you actually come into contact with social services or health, it's only then that you realise how broken it is. And how many times have we've gone in with families, and it's the first time they've ever had to deal with social services, and they can't believe this is all I'm offered. This is all that they can do. Just as we're like 2 15-minute calls a day, what does that do? Things like that. And totally. But we do accept it. We do as advocates, because we know that the system's broken, and that is actually the best you're going to get at the moment. And thanks, we do need to. I do agree. We need to find a way of fighting back, but I don't think we can completely absolve ourselves and say because we're out there and fighting on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't mean that we don't accept what the broken system as it is.
I absolutely agree. And, if anyone's feeling brave enough to admit this, I mean, I'll go first. I've been in meetings where I've had the thought. So tell me if you've ever had the thought, and it's let's say you're not saying anything, of appreciating how difficult it is for staff. So give us a thumbs up or a party face emoji. I don't know, anything to. Have you ever been in a meeting? So like the thing I'm thinking of is like asking for Section 17 leave, and the answer comes back, we've got no staff. And I see how hard the staff are working. I see how busy they are. I see, and then I go, okay.
Yeah, well, don't want to raise my hand.
Okay. Now, sometimes we might challenge it, but there have also been other times where I haven't. I've accepted it. And that's the, and I'm not saying that from self-criticism. I'm not saying that to blame myself. I'm not saying that. I'm just being honest. Let's have some honest bravery here around why do we do that? Because that's the follow-on question. Why do we do that? But we do it. I think we do it. Emma, and then I'll move on. You're just on mute, Emma. You're on mute, Emma. Emma. Oi, you're on mute. Emma. Emma. Oh, bless her. Emma.
Oh, sorry, I'm on mute. Some would say that was a blessing, but yes, I'm on mute. So I've always got a lot to say. I'm a great believer. I'll say it before you do it, Kate. I'm a great believer in advocacy, and I'm an advocate myself, and I'm a parent carer, so I see it from both sides. And having studied it in more detail and institutions and closed cultures, I see the Goliath that advocates are up against. And we are in a David and Goliath situation. There's no doubt about that. And what I see is advocacy has so much potential, not yet fulfilled, actually. And it needs, in my opinion, to evolve. And it's sort of stuck in a place I don't feel we have the same power, for instance, as social workers. Social workers are extremely powerful. They're better paid, they're unionized, they're part of the system. I feel that social workers know this, and that they therefore, when we have to champion our client and potentially go up against them, they have resources, backup, they have infinitely more power than us. There's no escaping that. And so what do we do with advocacy? I feel it needs to evolve. I feel we need to empower advocates even further, because I think we're a really important mechanism, an independent mechanism of control in a good way against this system. We can do something, but we can't.
I am going to give you some ideas on kind of how we respond.
Yeah,
I'm just conscious of time.
That was just what I'm saying. We can't do it as we are now. We need more.
We need to do things differently, don't we?
So I think hypernormalisation is, I don't think it's a bad theory, and I can see how it could work to a degree. So like all theories, it's got potential, but it's even more complicated than hypernormalisation. I think it's about power and control that we can dismantle.
Definitely.
But not now.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Gus, really quick, because I need to move on.
Yeah, sorry, Kate. Yeah, just on the point about social workers now. Obviously, I appreciate how hard social workers work, and they often have very heavy caseloads. But I do find a lot of the time, especially when it comes to discharge planning, I find more and more through experience, I feel I have to keep on top of what the social workers are doing and challenge them all the time. Especially, for example, something like, have you done the capacity assessment on care and accommodation? What's happening with the COP dolls application? Because quite often these things, they forget, or they fall through the cracks, and then suddenly someone's discharge is delayed further. So
that's right.
Yeah.
So nice segue. Thanks, Gus. So the next example is dolls. So if you want a system that's broken, just have a look at dolls. So the average time to process is 6 months. 6 months just to get the restrictions authorized. 6 months. I've got 6 months. If I object and somebody is restricting my liberty and I object, it's 6 months, is the average. Some are much more. And then look at this statistic for the system being broke. 50%, over 50% of applications weren't granted due to a change in people's circumstances. So it's taken that long to process the authorization that the circumstances have changed. So that's either the restrictions aren't needed anymore, or the person's been discharged from hospital, or you've died. 50,000 people died whilst waiting for their authorization to be, their deprivation to be authorized. Now, everybody agrees that the DOL system is broken, everybody, but it's the only thing we've got. So we better keep making those applications, haven't we? We better do the best we can. And there is literally no alternative. So we all buy into it. Now, when the government kicked the LPS, so when did LPS first get mooted as an idea? Was it 2017, 2018 with the Law Commission? That's how long ago LPS was started to be developed, 7 years ago. And when it was kicked into the grass by the government, who last year said it wouldn't happen this Parliament, yes, there was some outcry, but there wasn't a huge thing. You know, we kind of accepted it. It was, I remember rolling my eyes and going, well, no surprise there. What? No surprise there? That's hypernormalization. There's no credible alternative. So I buy into it because there's nothing else for me to do. That's it for me, a kind of a classic idea. So what do we do? And I'm gonna invite you to really think deep about culture, the culture of your organization. And you will see my lovely image of a plane. And I'm giving you this as an example of how in aviation, in aviation, safety critical features is absolutely key. So every, all the airlines, their biggest thing is making sure the planes don't fall out the sky. That is, everything's about safety critical. The pilots are trained in, safety first, safety first, safety first, safety first. That's everything. Now, if we're not safety critical, are we? We're not concerned about planes falling out of the sky. What are we concerned about? Give me a word that we're concerned about. So airlines, safety critical, planes not falling out of the sky. Heather, what are we concerned about? You just unmute. Heather.
Justice.
Justice. Beautiful. Beautiful. Amy's got it. Emma corruption. That's just like you. To go there. Yeah, love it. Absolutely love it. Love it. Thank you. But yeah, I'm on the page with Amy, which is about human rights. I'm thinking about having a culture of human rights. So if we see everything through the lens of human rights, I wonder whether that would be a way of us addressing hypernormalization. And when I think about the culture of human rights, it's about probing, questioning, using the law, using examples, nudging services. It's all those things, isn't it, that you're doing as an advocate when you fight for people. But if we nurture that as an organization and make human rights, it's almost like the welcoming breath every time we open the door to a partner, isn't it? It's human rights. It's the right to have voice, the right to not be stuck in a hospital, the right to have your restrictions looked at, the right to object to those restrictions. The right. Since when has sitting in A&E for 36 hours become normal? I saw an IMCare, a brilliant IMCare. She was doing an SMT decision for a lady, and at the end of the report was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And at the end of it, it said, this is important to the lady, and then it said, but there's a 12-month waiting list for dentists, so you'll need to do another SMT in 12 months' time when she's actually got an appointment, because things might have changed by then. Can you see how this kind of invades everything? So we want rights to be at the forefront of everything. And before I move into the isomorphism topic, one of the things that this requires of us, and I encourage you to write this down because it's really difficult. It's one of these things that we say, but it's actually really difficult. But you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because what happens when you see things that aren't working, we see the broken system, is it makes us feel uncomfortable. You said before, in that meeting, you accept, you tolerate things, you accept things that you know you shouldn't. It makes us feel uncomfortable. By definition, we don't like feeling uncomfortable. What do we like to feel? We like to feel comfort. So instead of staying in discomfort, yes, dignity, respect, comfort, we want to feel comfortable. So what we do is then we ignore it, or we defend it, or we justify it as normal. And instead of staying with discomfort, which is actually what we need to do, we need to sit in that discomfort, we run away. And I know I do. I do this every week. Of course I run away. Of course I run away from the challenge. Of course I do. Of course you do. It's okay. It's okay. But if we wanna change this, I think we need to start requiring ourselves to be uncomfortable more. To sit in it and to go, is this okay? Is this okay that this person doesn't have a dentist appointment for 12 months? And you know what? I don't know what the answer is. I don't think you know what the answer is, because you can't magic up a dentist to do this treatment. You can't jump the queue. These are not easy things to fix. But by sitting in that discomfort and creating a culture in your organization where these things are talked about, monitored through and safeguarded, that's how we do it, rather than it feels uncomfortable, I'm going to run away, either through justifying it or accepting it. Okay, I'll take a couple of comments and then I'll move on to isomorphism. Heather, then Chloe, and then Helen. Heather, was that a new hand or from before?
Sorry, I was just going to start typing it. I didn't. It was from last time. I'm sorry. But what I was going to say was, I think for those of us who've been sort of working in not necessarily advocacy, but people's rights kind of stuff for a long time, if we sit too long in discomfort, it can actually really affect our mental health on a personal level.
Okay.
And I'm just
yeah,
sort of saying to you,
point.
I mean, I've got
I do take
examples
that point.
where people have had social services saying, yes, we will pay for you to have 24/7 care in a bungalow, which we have provided for you. And the issue is that we can't get the staff to provide the care. So it's their own tenancy sort of thing. And and so that young person had to go back home, and honestly we fought and she was doing things like going to employment fairs with flyers saying, could you work with me? You know, she was really trying. And what happened is she had to go home because they couldn't get the staff, and eventually she had to give up this wonderful 2-bed bungalow with room for someone to be there overnight, with room for her, you know, with disability access, all the mobility stuff, all done. And I had to, if we hadn't accepted that we'd done everything we could do, where'd you go? You just end up insane, Kate.
I don't think you need to end up insane, but I totally take your point. And do you know what, Heather? I think, I don't know if this resonates to other people, I struggle with the tension in advocacy of the tension between idealism and pragmatism, realism. I really struggle with that tension. Should I be idealistic and demand what should happen? or do I become realistic and appreciate actually the world is unequal, it's imperfect, and we do the best job that we can. I personally struggle with that whole tension every single day when I work with people, real people. I'm so pleased that thank you for raising it, because what this is reminding us is that it's not easy. It's not easy. I think my thought listening to you is that's why culture matters, because we need cultures, don't we, in an organization where you're getting support, you're having somebody with your back, you're being pushed, but you're not taking on responsibility.
Well, you know, with something
on.
like that, I know this is what you're talking about, the hypernormalization of stuff, but we're talking about we need to recruit a workforce. Those people need to be there to provide it, and you know that it's half the battle getting somebody with their budget to say yes, you can have all that, but then it's like actually getting those services in place for them. And believe you me, I am not someone who is scared of like of raising issues or being can come over as obstinate or like a cracked record. I'm not scared of doing that, but I do know that it does impact on you. It really does impact on you.
It can. Yeah. I think it can
impact on you.
Shall we agree then this, because I'd love to hear from Chloe and Helen, is it then like I feel excited about spending my time looking at those questions rather than spending my time feeling impotent and helpless at the broken system.
I'm here. You know,
we're here, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're doing our best. Yeah. Thank you for those excellent points. Really well made. Really, really, really important. Chloe.
Yeah, I was just going back to obviously the culture of like healthcare, like still we're like 2 years on from COVID and they're still saying, oh well, it's because of COVID, and it's constantly that thing of, oh well, it's because of COVID or because it's because of this. And yeah, I've only been in advocacy for 6 months. I used to work in healthcare before that, but just think the culture needs to move on from COVID, and well, we can't do this because it's so
it's a story, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's a story.
Tiring. Keep going on. Oh, because it's COVID.
Well, we call it the COVID excuse.
Yeah. It gets used quite a bit.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Chloe. Yeah. Helen?
Yeah, thanks. Oh gosh, you've all said lots of things. So I think that what we're not doing is working together enough as a community of advocates, because I think this is clearly a systemic problem. And one of it's all very well saying human rights culture, but we have had 14 years, and I'm sorry to politicize it slightly, I'll try and keep it a low key. We've had 14 years of phrases like lefty lawyers, and we want to do away with the European Convention on Human Rights, and you
austerity.
and so on and so on. And that is hypernormalization, isn't it? It's getting us used to the idea of not having a human rights culture. And so as advocates, if we're going to have that human rights culture, we need to fight really hard to maintain it. And I think it's been very difficult for us to do it. You know, when you talk about realism versus idealism, of course, we do that every day. But how much of that realism becomes hypernormalization? And where do we stop? Where do we start?
And that's the question, Helen, I'm introducing to us as a group of thoughtful advocates. Where is that becoming accepted when we should be fighting back? Because it's not like a conscious thing that we've done. Like I hear advocates, you know, being
can I just make the point?
Please.
Can I just say about systemic advocacy and working together? Because we don't do enough of that. We're always competing for contracts and so on. We really need to be working together as a workforce.
I agree. That the power of that collectivism of Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I was just going to acknowledge that a lot of this is again, it's attention, because it only takes one person. You know, where does change start with? One thought, one person, one voice, and then it grows. But as a part of an organization, I do see advocates absolutely battered, not having enough time. You know, your time isn't protected. I think lots of and this is directed to the managers on the call today. You think about in supervision, how much of that balance is on closing cases. I mean, even as a phrase, that's uncomfortable. We're dealing with people's lives. It's the emphasis within the advocacy community at the minute is short-term, issue-based, in and out. As I said before, lots of services don't even have a physical presence in mental health wards. Lots of them do, but lots of them don't. That's the current climate. And that's not on any one person here, but it's something that I think we do need to kind of lean into. We need to, and funding. I'm just looking at comments in the chat box. Funding is a problem, and competitive tendering process is a problem. Short-term contracts is a problem. Contracts for 12 months, they're a problem. This is all normalizing, the race to the bottom, isn't it? Yeah. Did you know we did a very cursory, and I certainly wouldn't put my name on this publicly or publish it, but for 6 months a year ago, I tracked advocacy contracts. I tracked what they were advertised at, what the financial envelope was available, and then I tracked what it actually went for. Now I'm going to make this figure up just to illustrate where I found. But let's say the contract was advertised at $1 million. On average, what they actually went for was 15% less. So that's us. That's us saying we can deliver that contract for 15% less. And that was the winning bid, by the way. That was the winning bid. So it's a problem. It's a problem. Right, so I'll leave that one with you because I do want to cover isomorphism. So it's a different concept, but it's really interesting in the same way hypernormalization is. So isomorphism, it talks about culture. It talks about the consuming of one culture by another. So I've done the image of a big fish eating a little fish. Now, do you think you're the big fish or the little fish as an advocacy service?
I would like to be the big fish.
I didn't ask what you'd like to be, Chloe.
Well,
which one do you think you are?
Well, yeah, no, the big fish. I mean, just obviously when people think that we're social workers, and then you have to explain.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what happens is we're the little fish, and we get consumed, taken over, influenced by the big culture of the culture of the dominant organization. So by this, I'm talking about the NHS. I'm talking about the local authority. I'm talking about the care home that you work in. I'm talking about the children's services that you're in. That there's a risk. So I should say risk because you might not be taken over, but there's a risk that the dominant culture consumes you as the smaller one. Now, this isn't an advocacy, this is sociology. Okay, this has been around for like 20, 30 years, this idea. And I just think it's really interesting. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper. And this is kind of what the thinking is. This is what the research is. So it tends to happen when the organization, like the advocacy, becomes homogenous. Now, I think we've done that a little bit. We've lost a lot of our grassrootsy nature. We've lost a lot of our political activism. We've become commissioned to deliver a service. That can stifle. Can you see how this kind of something that we're consciously choosing? And that can stifle innovation, reaches a threshold and stops. And then look at this last line. Competition for the same resources, legitimacy, and customers. I think that can be applied to the kind of state of advocacy. And there are different types of isomorphism. I'm just going to throw these in because again, I think these are interesting. So coercive isomorphic change is when you are put under pressure from the NHS or the local authority. Can you give me an example of where you may have been put under pressure to do things in a particular way, or, you know, you've changed how you've done it because of that coercion, because of pressure from someone else? Can anyone give me an example? I've got loads from my practice, by the way. I can give you. Leslie, hiya.
Hiya. Okay. Well, every time a best interest assessor writes on Form 3 that they think the advocate needs to raise a Section 21A, it's we know when to do that. We don't need to be told. It's bigger than that. It's much bigger than that. I mean, there's that whole thing about local authorities commissioning advocacy services that still doesn't taste right, isn't it? And a lot of clients feel that we're not independent because they know that they pay for us. So
let's just pick on that example of Section 21A challenges. As far as I'm aware, advocates aren't the only person who can bring Section 21A challenges, are they? And if you think about just taking a step back from that, how many times are you put under pressure from a professional to do something that they should be doing? That's you know, that's and almost like inviting you to join, really surreptitiously inviting you to join the professional team. Like I thought of it this week. This week I was sending an email to some professionals. I copied in the person I was supporting. So they asked me to send this email. I copied in. When the professionals replied, they didn't copy in the person. What's that about? What is that about? Part of that, I think, is about pulling me into being part of the professional team. So I then send an email back, copy in my partner, and then put PS, can you make sure, you know, if you send an email to me, unless there's a very good reason, you know, make sure that you include the person in. And what came back? An email without the person copied in. It's like they weren't even aware they were doing it. That is coercive, because it's very easy. If I'd have missed that, I would have then had this conversation between professional to professional. And there's something about, actually, lots of us feel special, feel important, feel purposeful when we are doing that representational advocacy, and we've got that relationship with the professionals. That's kind of, the answer. It happens all the time. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move on because I've only got 9 more minutes and I've got a few more slides. Is that all right, Helen? Hold your thought and I'll bring you in a bit. Mimetic isomorphism is mimicking. So when I'm just reading Hazel's message. Yeah, it does happen all the time, doesn't it? Yeah. Mimetic is when we are imitating, we're mimicking the organization structure because we think it's helpful. And I've seen lots of advocacy services do this. So I'll tell you when we do it when we suddenly go from being small to large, or from small to medium. It happened about 20 years ago when we started having statutory advocacy. I remember in a meeting, an advocate arguing about having business cards. And I remember saying, why do you need business cards? Well, to look professional and giving it out to the professionals. It's like, why? It's not about you. It's about, this is a children's advocacy service. Remember, it's about the child. Child doesn't have a business card. Why would you have a business card? And it was this idea of professionalising advocacy. To the time when we had statutory advocacy and the qualification came in and QPMs happened, standards, we had all this professionalisation. We were mimicking all the professional bodies. Does that make sense? Okay, and then the third one is, let's just get my slides up. This is an interesting one. So this is about when it becomes like an echo chamber. So because we recruit people who are generally from the same demographics or values, we all approach things in the same way. So we all morph into the same thinking. And generally speaking, advocacy, professional advocacy, and if we look around the session today, there is a a more common demographic, isn't there, of who is an advocate. I'll come to how we challenge some of these in a second. Helen, over to you before I move on.
Yeah, it's just that all of these, I was just thinking as you were speaking, and that was why I put my hand up before, and that was in relation to coercive. And it all started for me when I was an advocate. This is a few years ago now, when we had to do KPIs, and we all had to collect all this information, which I know can be important and is important. But
Very
I remember a whole bunch of us who were IMHAs saying, do you know how hard it is to get the date of birth from somebody who's paranoid and doesn't want to give any information out about themselves? And we went through this whole list of things that it might have seemed very simple to the commissioners or to our managers, but really wasn't on the ground. And I that to me was the beginning of when it all started to feel slightly like things were getting out of control, and we were losing sight of, it's not just human rights culture, is it? It's the culture of looking out for people. And
totally, Helen.
and
isn't it interesting how as I was listening to you there, I was thinking about how many referral processes are like contacting the local authority. So there's like a central number. It's very impersonal, it's very impersonal. Sometimes, I mean, I was speaking to an advocacy service yesterday. I really rate this advocacy service, but they don't give out the mobile numbers of the advocates. It's interesting. So I was the person meant to contact you. And part of it, I think, is because we're morphing into those professional, like local authority things to think about. There are advocacy services who have NHS email addresses. Exactly. I mean, that's a big flag. I was with an advocate about 2 months ago in a hospital. Again, amazing advocate, one of the best advocates I've seen. Complicated, challenging work, really challenging work, and it was non-stop. And she was in an acute setting, and it was really tough. I was blown away by the skills advocate. And it was only until we sat down and kind of debriefing, I noticed that the lanyard said NHS. And I was like, oh, wow, you've got an NHS lanyard. And she said, oh, yeah, I need that in order to get in. That's isomorphism. So visible threat to independence, because I'm going around with an NHS lanyard, and on the badge, you had a picture and the name of the advocacy, but it had NHS on. That's not in, there's a threat there. Now, I'm not, saying therefore it's a rubbish advocate. Contrary, it was amazing advocacy, this woman. But that's an example of isomorphism, of us being consumed within that big. I've got to do that. We tell ourselves the story. I've got to do this in order to come into the nonsense. And the amount of times I hear that from people, I've got to do that because of it. It's like, where does it say that? Show me where it says that. Doesn't. We've created, the isomorphism. We've created a little story. So wanted to ask, where are you? I mean, I've given you lots of examples from my practice and my observations of working with advocates. Where do you see these concepts? And thank you to everyone that's spoken, but I'll just invite anyone who hasn't perhaps to share any reflections. And I'll stop. Zanib.
The bit about wanting to not appear, not try and get in when you're having to advocate against a professional. But I've been advocating for 6 years, and I'm only doing my advocacy qual now. So there's a lot that I'm still learning. I support a lot at medical appointments, and I've been in and out of hospitals my whole life, so I'm quite familiar with the NHS healthcare staff. And whenever I'm supporting with a client, I have learned that unless I go into that room looking and feeling confident, so person that we're speaking to is probably going to think that I'm just, you know, my client's friend, or and also I'm told I look very, very young for my age. So I think they also think this is someone who probably doesn't know very much. But when I start speaking, and I don't always, because just me being there and trying to look confident is enough for that professional to be like, okay, so tell me what is going on. Like, how long has it been going on? The attitude changes. And that is not me trying to get in there, but I am guilty of trying to present myself as a professional, even though when I'm trying to encourage my clients to be self-advocating and give them positive encouragement, and also insert those boundaries, because they need that sometimes to self-advocate. I do remind them that everything that I do as an advocate, they can do as well. The only difference is I just have independent advocacy against my name. But I have, yeah, it's quite, it makes such a difference to the attitude. And I think when I open my mouth as well, and I do actually know stuff about the health process and different conditions, that does throw professionals off. And then they'll be like, oh, wait, I'll stop trying to get you out of the room. And then I'll actually listen to what your client needs to do. So it does work.
Yeah.
But it's just not, it shouldn't have to be like that.
No. Thank you. Thanks for that. Thank you. Laura.
Hello. So I think one thing that possibly occurred to me that can be quite a sort of insidious way of I don't know if sometimes it might be a deliberate attempt of professionals almost sort of to get you on their side, or sometimes it isn't. They're doing it, they think they're doing a good thing, but I guess the impact is the same. They're making like a moral argument, like, you see, it's really in this person's best interest that we don't share this information with them, and you have to think of them, and or we think you should be, you know, supporting this because we're just thinking of the person here, and if you do this, and kind of that side of things. So it's sometimes being sort of really
Definitely.
clear,
Definitely.
that and strong.
There's a mum I've been working with for about 2 years, and her son sick and cheese to get him out of hospital. And about 6 months ago, so we have monthly discharge meetings, and about 6 months ago we went to this meeting. And what I want you to picture the scene. So there's 30 organizations, 30 people easily in these meetings. It's massive. So the whole boardroom is hired out. There's a secretary, someone really senior, the head of the ICB's there, really senior people. And naturally, I want you to picture the scene, naturally everybody's like catching up. So, hey Laura, hey Zanab, you know, oh, how are the kids? Oh, have you been on holiday? Oh, you know, you look well, you know, where have you been? Or you look relaxed, or you look everybody's doing that social, what do they call it? Social currency, isn't it? Like we're connecting. And I'm doing it. I'm like, oh, hi Neil, you're not seeing you for a while, keeping well. I'm doing it because I'm naturally happy, you know, want to connect with people. Anybody else do that? Give me a little, you it's all about that smooth, isn't it? It's like there's what do you call, there's a name for it, about like it's like social currency, they call it. Anybody know what that phrase is? It's not social currency, but it's like, it's like it eases things, it lubricates things, they call it. And anyway, I turned to my partner, and she says, I hate this bit. I hate this bit. And I went, oh, what do you mean? What do you hate? She said, I hate this bit. Hate this bit. And she said to me, she said, everybody is turning up to these meetings, all happy clappy, all pleased to see someone, and whilst my son's still in hospital. And it just hit me like a railroad. Hit me like oh my God, I've become part of the professional team. I hadn't even clocked that's how she was feeling. I'd become part of that. Hi Neil, hi Katie, you know, hi. I'd left her. I'd left that connection of what that feels like to be the one person in the room who hates these meetings. That's isomorphism. It's honestly, we've got to be so aware of it happening if we want to preserve that integrity of what we're doing. Yeah. And on that note, my friends, I'm going to draw it to a close because we've slightly overrun. So I'll leave you to think and reflect about these concepts. They're really big. I'd love for us to have like another session maybe in a month's time to come back and share our thoughts. I don't know if anybody's up for that. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. Cool. All right.
Hey,
Yeah,
is there
thank
anywhere
you.
where we can
Update,
find the
everyone.
recording? Because I joined in
I'll
like 20 minutes. Sorry, I was on a
yeah,
business.
I'll in fact